Good morning, folks. Another glorious morning from Nebraska. Gotta love these mornings. Hey, we're back on the chicken coop today, so I wanted to discuss the next phase of the project. Actually, the next two phases, because otherwise it would be a pretty short video. But we want to discuss roofing and siding. So we discussed the purlins, which is what the roofing is screwed down to, in that last video. So now we're going to talk about the siding itself, or excuse me, the roofing itself. So we wanted to go with a metal roof, and we ordered it through Menards, but you can get it through Lowe's, Home Depot, all that. You can order the color, you can order the length, and all of that. So you don't have to do any cutting or anything when you get it. So we ended up with 6-foot length on our roof. Remember, we had the 8-foot wide building. So once you figure the metal going up to the peak and your overhang and all that, we ended up with 6 feet. So we ordered all of our sheets 6 feet long, and they're about 3 foot wide. So we have a 16-foot building, so we needed just over 5 sheets. So we had to order that 6th sheet to finish out one side. So total we had 12. 6 on one side, 6 on the other. It took about a week to come in. And if you're going to do metal roofing, it's not just the roofing that you need to order. There's other parts and pieces that you need to order. So let's go over some of those parts and pieces. So one of the first things you need to get after you order your roofing, and you order it all at the same time, is the edge molding. Back in the day, nobody ever put edge molding on a building. In fact, I don't even know if they had it. But what that does is it wraps around the fascia from the top of the metal. And if you look here on the end, it wraps over the top and gives you a nice solid attachment. That edge cap holds your metal down so the wind can't get up underneath the edge of the building. Now, because the way our sheets came out, we weren't able to go over a full rib, but there's a small rib in there that will keep the rain from going all the way under and off the edge underneath the edge molding. If we look at the other side, you will see that the edge molding goes over a full rib, created a nice watertight seal, and then it comes down the fascia board and it includes a little drip edge on the bottom, and that holds your tin down on the edges very well. The other thing you need to order is the ridge cap that goes on top and seals your peak, because where the metal comes together, there's a little gap up there that you also want to keep watertight. The next thing is closure strips. So I don't know if you can see it, and I'll zoom in to see if you can. There's little foam strips that go between the metal and the purlin to seal up those ribs where the holes would be. And they're sticky back, and they're called closure strips, and they're foam, and you lay them out as you go, and it makes a closure on that strip. Now, there's 2 types of closure strips. What you're looking at right now is an inside closure. Up there underneath the peak is an outside closure. And you can't see that. It's up underneath that ridge cap. And that sticks on top of your metal, and it's got just the opposite cutouts, so it goes over the ribs instead of under the ribs, and it closes that gap up underneath your ridge cap so no bugs can get up in there and rain can't blow up in there either. So those are the pieces that you need when you order your roof. They come in different lengths. The shortest length for the edge molding was 12 feet. So we just bought one and cut it in half so we didn't have to have a big long trailer when we picked this stuff up. And then the ridge cap came in 10-foot lengths. So we had to get 2 of those, and I overlapped a little ways. We cut one off. But that's what you need to figure when you're ordering your roof. Now, when you're screwing this stuff down, you need to make sure that you get the right kind of screws. There's regular screws that they use for this, and most of your boxes of screws will come with the little bit that you need to screw it in also. You need the little magnetic hex head bit that goes in your driver. Now, make sure, especially if you have like an exposed ceiling underneath, that your screws aren't crazy long coming all the way through, especially like on an eave. If you were to put wood up in here underneath the soffits, you don't want your screws coming all the way through the sheeting and sticking out underneath here where you can see them. So make sure your screws aren't so long that they're going to be an eyesore in here. So if you have, we had the 3/4 inch purlin, so we ordered 3/4 inch screws. So once it goes through the metal, it really doesn't poke through the 3/4 inch purlin. Now, if you're going through thicker material or you need to go through several layers of material, you need to figure that as well. Now, on the ridge cap, we needed that to hold down very tightly. We used, I believe, 2.5 inch screws up there because you're going through the ridge cap, and we went through each rib, so it's got to go through the rib, and then it's got to go down and have enough to bite into the purlin. We had plenty, and I'll show you on the inside. So if you look up there on that top purlin, you can see the screws come all the way through. I wasn't too worried about that because I won't be up there working that high up, so I'm not worried about poking me in the head or something like that. But you can imagine if they were down here further, if we were working on a ladder or something, that would be a little dangerous. So just make sure you have enough to anchor it down real well. Now when you're screwing those screws in, they have a little, like a nylon washer underneath the screw head that goes down and seals against the metal. You want to make sure you don't over compress that washer where it'll like spin it out. So just go down to where it snugs up and kind of mushrooms just a little bit, and that's all you need to go. Years ago, they put all this tin on with nails, and they would use those nails that had like a lead washer underneath and would smash down and seal up. But if you've ever seen the old tin roofs, once the wind works on them for years, those nails start working their way out. So I always recommend using screws instead of nails. Now the way your sheets come together, the edge of your sheet is going to have a rib on it that goes over the rib on the leading edge of the last sheet. So it hooks over the top. So as you can see, hopefully up there on the roof, we put our screws right next to that rib, so it's got more holding power to hold that last sheet down. And that's why we did it that way. So I always put my screws right next to the edge of the sheet, and then I continue that pattern all the way across. So that's about it on your metal roofing. It's not hard to do. If you remember on the last video, I told you how we did it. I just did one sheet at a time from a ladder, so I didn't need to be up there on top of the roof. You just need to leave enough room through in between your purlins where you can get up through there. And then the very last sheet we did from a ladder on the side of the building, so we're not crawling around up on the roof. So let's talk about siding now. We chose to go with the 4x8 T111 siding. So we could cover as much area as we could. We didn't want to do like a lot of individual lap siding. It's just a chicken house, so we didn't want to go too crazy. So if you remember when we did our layout, when we did our studs, we did 16 inches on center, which comes out to 48 inches on the splice. Now when you're screwing your siding down, my first run of siding, I always cut the lap portion off of the edge. And what that does is it puts you more in the center of your 4-foot spacing. Ooh, Brandy's chasing another rabbit out there. She gets all excited. So when you cut that lap off, it brings your 4-foot spacing back more on the center of your layout. And when this piece laps over this piece, you got you're screwing right into the center of the board instead of kind of on the edge. So always start out with that first sheet with it cut, and then your layout will stay the same all the way across. Now, anytime you screw down siding, check your local codes, but most of the time, in the field of the siding, your screws are a foot apart, and on the edge of your siding, they should be 6 inches apart, so any edge. So you can see down along the edge, we're around 6 inches, probably closer in most of the spots. And then in the field, which is the body of the board or the siding, we're only a foot apart. So on every stud, we went up there on the bird blocks and we marked the center of every stud. So all I had to do once we tacked the siding up is I got my big 6-foot level out here, put it on that mark up there, and then we marked all the way down the siding with a pencil where the center of that stud is. So it makes it much easier when you come back through putting those screws in. You can know where all your studs are. Kelly also marked down there on the concrete form that used to be down there where the center of the stud was, so we could work up from the bottom also. So then, once I get the board tacked up here, and I know there's our rabbit right there, Ditch Brandy, come over hopping here by me. You better look out there, little bunny. She's hot on your trail. So what I do once I get the siding tacked up is I'll go to each stud and I'll pull my tape down. I have my cordless driver in one hand, the tape in the other. I come down and find 4 feet, and then I put my cordless driver right on 4 feet, and I put my tape measure away in my tool pouch. I get a screw out, and then I know right where that 4-foot screw goes, and we put it in. And then I do the same thing at 2 feet, and then the same thing at 2 feet from the bottom. And then I can go through and just eyeball the ones that go in between those. So I kind of like to keep things symmetrical. That's got my OCD working. And then after we come through and get all the siding up, I come through with caulking, and I caulk where all the seams are. Anywhere where we have a joint, I'll come through with paintable caulk. Make sure it's paintable, otherwise your paint's not going to want to stick to it. And I caulk all those edges. I caulk around all the windows, and so on and so on. And that's what she looks like when she's done. Now, once we get this painted today, we're going to go get some 1x4 trim boards, and we'll trim both sides of the corners, around the doors, around the windows, and we're going to run a trim board all the way up underneath those bird blocks to close that little gap up there, because you'll see under the bird blocks there's that little tiny gap, but that the trim board will close that right up. But that's how you do your siding. Let's show you how to do a gable end here. So the gable end up top, instead of using 2 pieces of siding to go vertically, we turn the top piece horizontal. So we could do 1 piece all the way across with no seam in the middle. And it looks just fine. You can do it the other way if you want, and keep your lines running, get them all matched up. But I didn't want a seam up there. So we cut that all into 1 piece and screwed it in there. So in between where your siding meets, at the top of your 8-foot, if you're doing any kind of gable end or 2-story, you got to get a piece of what's called Z-bar. It's Z-bar flashing. So the Z-bar laps over the top of your bottom sheet. Once you get your bottom sheets on, you put your Z-bar on top of that, laps over at 1/2 inch on your bottom sheet, goes in and then up about 1.5 inches behind that top sheet. So any water that comes down off the top can't go in and run down the wall. It'll just go to that metal and then run off on the outside. So those pieces of Z-bar flashing usually come in 10-foot lengths. So we had to cut them down to 8-foot, and it just, I do little nails. I tack them up there with little nails. And then once you screw down the upper portion of the siding, those screws will hold that Z-bar down there. So just make sure you've got screwing surfaces all the way around that you need. If you remember, we held our fascia board up 3/4 of an inch to meet the top of the purlins to close that gap. So that allowed 3/4 underneath for a screwing surface for that top piece. So that's how you do your gables. That's about all there is to siding, folks. It's not real difficult. So that's the stage we're at right now with the chicken coop. We're going to put some paint on it today, like I said. While it's chilly this morning, you don't want to paint when it's below about 50 degrees. So until it gets to be about 50 degrees, I'm going to be cutting door molding for the inside of these doors to close that the daylight gap around there, and it has something for the door to actually to shut against. Right now they're just on the door latches themselves. So I'm going to cut 1.5 inch molding to go all the way around the inside of the door. It's kind of a closure strip for that. So if you got any questions or comments, please leave them. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions on your building project. But until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. Come back and see us.